things for the next consumer app, which for the thousandth time, which basically does the same thing the other 100 of them did. So we're going to pop this bubble and then re-incentivize capital to basically flow into things like AI and stuff that we actually need moving forward. Which, if you think about it, that should be the government's role. Like they shouldn't be. It should be the government's role in a sensible system where they shouldn't be wastage through financialization on apps that don't really do shit. And it should be more focused on, if you had a system that could focus it more and towards more, I would say, productive forces for future growth, that would make more sense. And that is basically what Keizo was talking when he said they had multiple Manhattan projects. That is another form of a Manhattan project in the tech industry, if you think about it.
Yes. So China, for example, is an example of the CCP has the kind of power and tries to do things like this. For example, they can say, as they have done, give money to electric car companies because we want to dominate that market. Give money meaning make these loans available, print the money, increase our balance sheet, whatever, make the loans available to these particular companies. Governments, however, also have to react to the unknowns of the. So central planning is great. It is great in certain regards. So I'm not comparing it now with the alternatives. I'm just talking about, okay, now so you're central planning. The unfortunate thing is you still have to deal with chaos and you have to make decisions like, okay, I'm gonna also have to inflate a bubble, right? To keep my people happy, like the housing bubble that China did. They built all that crap on purpose, right? And I'm sure there was some political or whatever reason for doing that, right? So yes, deflation of bubbles and doing rational things, but also inflating bubbles, pacifying the people, and certain types of things like that. It's all part of the game. No shade.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen in China, there is graveyards of electric vehicles. I still don't exactly know why this is the case, because if you look at the cost of having sent these vehicles to Africa, even if it was just for parts, right? Like,
Nigga, electric vehicles to do what, bro? If you had
no,
an electric vehicle in Kenya, where are you gonna drive it outside of like central Nairobi?
that's the issue. Yeah, Nairobi is the only place where we have charging systems. It's like,
That's the
yeah, but
problem.
okay, yeah,
They can
but
only be exported to other first world or first. To be honest, other first world countries. You really can't export them anyway,
yeah, but they could have at least kept them in good condition. I was literally just seeing them just outside.
bro. Keizo, it's more useful to just throw it away, bro. You know how expensive it is to keep it
Exactly.
to maintain it, bro.
We just talked about entropy,
It's like
guys.
the same thing. It's basically the same thing the American government does with a lot of its military hardware. Uh, don't
Hmm.
they have places where they just throw them away over time? Because a lot of
Yeah,
these states, I read one time, a lot of these states have contracts to with the military industrial complex or the military
yeah,
companies uh, that have private contracts with the government, and obviously they have to keep making these stuff to keep the people employed, and the governor will incentivize the companies to keep building it, even though the past a certain limit they don't need it. So they just build it, throw it in a junkyard, and call it a day if there's no one else to buy for it. Because they even produce more than the global economy is willing to intake. They can't even sell it off to other countries.
yeah. That's a good point. Actually, yeah, redundancies. I think we mentioned this before, but redundancies are kind of maintaining the system to allow for growth. So, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Um, but with the whole bubbles going on, I mean, with some of these countries, one thing I will say about them, like let's say China has got some crazy real estate bubble. America had some weird real estate one. Although Ike, right? And I never believed the 2008 whatever. I actually tried to buy a house in which state was it? Right, Michigan. Right, it was somewhere in Michigan. I tried to actually buy a house, a foreclosure house for like $20,000 or something. Right, during that time, because I was like, bro, this is all BS, right? I had no idea of, like, economics or anything, or why the so-called crash really happened, right? I wasn't even comprehending any of that stuff, but I just kind of knew, nah, this is insane. This is America. White people are going to buy these houses. I'm going to buy a house, and in 5 years' time, my 20,000 is going to be worth, I don't know, 150,000. Uh, so I
Yeah,
guess it
that's
depends.
obviously, yeah. If you're an alien coming in, like if you're just coming from a different city and there's a car wreck, right, and people are bleeding on the floor and crawling, you don't go by and be like, "Wow, why aren't they picking up? Look at all these free cars, or all this. Why aren't they taking these parts and these? You're not even seeing what's going on. You're looking at engines that you can refurbish and stuff. Like, yeah, the issue is not the fact that of houses. The issue is a money issue. So which is a credit issue. It's a debt issue.
Mhm.
The whole system was heavily in debt, and that cycle comes around, or it keeps cycling and cycling and cycling until at some point something breaks. Somebody can't get paid. Somebody in the chain, whether it's some bank or some insurance company, doesn't have the liquidity or the solvency or whatever the fuck it is, and then the thing comes crashing down. But the way people who talk about it as basically being a demographic issue, after World War II, you have the birth of the baby boomers, as they're called, the largest generation ever existed. The inflation went way up when they came into the workforce and competing for goods and services and whatever, blah blah blah. That was like in the 70s into the 80s, and then, but at around the 80s, the wages didn't continue to go up though, but assets were rising, right? And people
Yeah.
were borrowing money to buy these assets because their wages are not really going up, and the money, the liquidity was given to them, and then the chickens came home to roost. But that's just one big cycle. But this cycle is what happens anytime anybody borrows money from for anything, right? And at some point you're gonna be like, okay, can you actually pay it back?
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, and Abby, earlier you did mention something about the modern monetary theory, right? And or rather analysis. Let's call it analysis. And you mentioned about, like, printing money, and how that can actually stimulate an economy. Yeah, I really spent many hours brooding over this, to try to find a solution. I think me and Ike did find some semblances to that whole thing and how it could kind of work in an African country. But it really still relies on exports, right? Like, having excess productivity from that money to stimulate economy, so that you can still exchange it for euro
Yes,
dollars. Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, then
I
that
was
makes
just gonna
sense.
say the same thing.
Okay.
So I was just gonna say the same thing. So I laugh when people say, "Oh, like when I say you can print money to increase productivity, it has to be a certain type of productivity. Like if you just print money and you're going to build another skyscraper, what the hell is that skyscraper going to do in long-term productivity? Nothing.
Nothing. Yeah. The only way
But
is,
if
let's
you're
say, go ahead.
okay, yeah, it might create, short term, it will have a boost because
Yeah.
okay, people have to work to build that skyscraper, and you're going to sell that how floors or whatever in that place. But up like after 1 or 2 years, it's going to become a speculative good, and it doesn't really produce much past that point. And the thing people don't
So.
understand about assets is, okay, look, you build a house, right? And that house is worth 200K.
Mhm.
When that house becomes 400K down the line, bro, money has to be sucked out from the actual economy to make up for that 400K when someone buys it. So
Mhm.
you have an asset. Think about it like there's a sponge on one side and a sponge on the other side, right? Here's asset goods, and this side is just actual money in the economy that's flowing around.
Mhm.
When the value of one thing is growing, you're going to have to suck the money flow from the actual economy to make up
Yeah.
for the increasing asset price on one end.
Yeah.
So you actually, when asset prices increase, it's take and the productivity in an economy is not increasing at the same rate. It's sucking money for that asset price to be sustained. It has to suck money out of from one as from the ec- economy, productive economy sector to the asset economy
AKA,
sector.
AKA, and even more than
Because
that.
if that doesn't happen, then where's that 400K coming from to make up? to pay for for
Yeah.
that increase.
No, you're 100%
That's
right,
why
and it's even better. Yeah, go ahead.
if you are going to print that money, it has to be into something. Let's say there's a minefield. Your country has established that we have X amount of, I don't know, oil or gold or whatever. If you're paying to get that mined within your own country's economy, so you're building the refineries, or you're building, whether it's the oil refinery or the gold refinery, you're building to establish that mine. That actually has long-term benefits. Whereas if you're just building the next skyscraper, it doesn't do shit. Or if you're just building a train track from one bumfuck place to another bumfuck place that has no economic value, it doesn't do shit.
Hmm. No, you're right. You're
That's a
right,
lot
and
of the problems that African countries have. They keep saying, "Oh, we're building infrastructure from from this area to the other area." Okay, what are they going to trade? Air. Like you haven't. What are they trading? They
not
haven't
nothing.
built the actual, like. Okay, let's say you're building a train, a railway from Nairobi to Addis. What is Addis going to trade with Nairobi? What is Nairobi going to trade with Addis? There has to actually be something to trade to begin with.
Yep.
So if you're
Yeah,
not
yeah, that makes
building that productive, think about it. When the railways were built in the U.S. in the beginning, it was to transport oil.
oil and
They
gold.
didn't just say we're going to build the trainways and then we'll find something to trade. The demand for oil to be transported was already there. It wasn't even initially built to transport people. That wasn't where they made their initial profit. The oil demand was there, and then they built the transportation system to transport the
Yep.
goods.
Then the coal
That's why when you
and
look at
gold.
the one railway that China built that is still doing extremely well till now, even with all the is the one from Addis to Djibouti, because all of Ethiopia's exports go through there. So even
Hmm.
if production capabilities haven't been increased technically by that, there was an actual demand for that railway to exist and for those roads to exist for now at least.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And of course, like so, if you look at, let's say, economy in a thermodynamic system, low, um, it's all about heat exchange, right? And it's like if you want to lose weight, it's all about energetics. Yes, other factors play in, but it's still energetics, right? Even genetics, whatever, ectomorphs, endomorphs, that's all still the same stuff. So I guess what I'm trying to say, Abby, is you're right. And to be more precise, if you can get the money to come from somewhere else, you're even better off than just being even internally productive. If you can get the net export higher than the net imports, you're already doing pretty well, right?
Hmm. Yep.
Yeah, so it makes sense. But look, let me ask you a question, Abby, and also Ike, right? How are you gonna get African people to understand economics or science at a intuitive level, right? Sure, we have loads of smart eggheads, but they don't really get the spirit of shit. That's the issue that I have with these people.
Bro, you might as well just ask me. I don't know, bro. How do you expect me to answer? I don't even think there's an actual answer to that.
Well, do you think
You
he's
might as
right?
well just ask me, does the God of the Bible exist, man? How the fuck should I know?
Do you
No, we
think
just
he's
have to
right?
be honest.
Do you think that Africans per se, the ones who are good enough to understand these things, just don't understand it at an intuitive level? Is Kaiser right, or is he out here going crazy again?
No, he knows I'm right. He said the same shit before, so he
Well,
has
yeah.
to.
So, obviously, there's no. It's one of those questions where there's no answer, even if there was an answer. What's the point? It's not even actionable. But just
Yeah,
to let you know,
I
Kaiser,
don't
I
think
have.
most people have to understand it though. Like, if we're being honest,
Yeah, that was the first thing I was
just the
going to
people in
say.
certain positions need to understand. Like, not everyone has to understand. Like, not everyone has to intuitively understand. Like, whatever you're doing in your field, whatever I'm doing in my field, whatever Ike is doing in your field, you just have to understand it, and you have to be in a position to enact it. I think the proper question is, how do you get those who properly
Yeah,
understand the fields they're in to get to that position of power?
you
Because if
are
that's
ones you've
the
been
other
waiting.
question you're asking is, bro, most people on this planet don't intuitively understand it, for being honest.
You're
True.
basically asking you. He's basically asking himself, like Kaizo. He's saying, Kaizo, why am I a bitch, and why am I not doing something? Talking about these other people whom are supposed to understand things.
I mean, like from in defense of Abby, right? Like, I know how East Africans are, right? Like, our IQ is lower than South Africans. You would rather be in South Africa dealing with with some westernized Bantus than a bunch of crazy East Africans that will kill him because he smelt the wrong injera at the wrong time, right? So you have to take that shit in context.
Speaking of injera, Kaizo, I just want to let you know that I actually have some cold biryani with some piping hot goat curry right now. Just so you
Oh,
know.
okay, bro, you need to have a naan, nice soft fermented naan. Right, I made that shit the other day. Fire with garlic inside it, with a little bit of cilantro on top, with the biryani and the lamb curry. Yeah, yeah, that shit will be fire. Yeah, but Abby, let me ask you a question, right? The reason brought this up, right? Ethiopians or no, Habish, whatever, Ethiopians. You niggas didn't do much with the whole teff flour stuff. Why? Like, I don't mean like, don't tell me like Tunisia will be like, oh, there's this one old lady out there making pasta from teff. No, no, no. You know exactly what I mean by that, right? The Italians, exported wheat. The Russians control the production. How come Ethiopians ain't exporting that shit? It's like the same. It pisses me off because Habesha, you guys should have colonized us a long time ago, but it took you until 1896 for you to start thinking of the Southern nations people to colonize. Why are Africans
I've always
so?
wanted that, bro. I've always wanted that. All of like when you look at Ethiopian history, all of the wars have been facing northwards, bro. Even when they
Yeah.
tried to expand, it's always been northwards. It's never been southwards for whatever reason. Well, to be fair, they did have some of the Midlands that are now currently being occupied by your people to a certain
Oh
point.
yeah,
But from then,
yeah. But even
if you're meaning to modern day Kenya and stuff, yeah, I get what you mean. I don't know why.
interesting, interesting. Yeah, I believe that it's just a typical. It's an African spirit of wanting. Like I mentioned this before. Like the shamans. Like African shamans didn't want to share information. They just want to be the only high level people. So, when the Habesha had all that information, knowledge of like writing, Jesus, like for example, how the hell, right? It's Oromo and Somali in the same region, and yet they still can't write. But
I thought they
like
could
that's
write, bro. I'm not even gonna lie to you. But to be fair, Keizo, I'm not even gonna lie to you, man. If you grow up, I didn't even know much about like Somalis until I ended up coming on this channel. So
they couldn't
I think
write.
you
No.
just live a very secluded life. You don't really focus on that nigga. He's just like your enemy. Fuck him. Like you I would have to say one thing, bro. I do the one thing white people have done better than most is they do study their enemy or people they want to conquer better than most. Where
Mm.
the African mentality has been, look, man, we just need to kill this nigga, fuck him, and everything he stands for. Like, there's never been like this. Oh, we want to understand him so we can defeat him. It's just, bro, kill him. Like he bleeds. Just if you can, just hit him with an arrow or something and call it a day.
Mm. Okay, makes sense. Makes sense. So in a way, we don't really respect. Yeah, we don't really even respect each other enough to like go deep into stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes
I
sense.
mean,
Makes sense.
but you
Like,
see it on both ways. Like when a Somali says anything about Abishas, it's mostly like whatever his grandma told him or his granddad told him. It's not really like he knows Habashas or anything about Habasha. Just oh, you eat raw
yeah,
meat because we made you eat raw meat by when we invaded you. You couldn't cook your meat. Bro, they actually say that like you couldn't cook your meat or else we'll spot you. So you had like obviously that has no like logical sense to it because you can
yeah.
cook meat
You
without
could
being
have cooked
spotted. Like
during the
what the fuck?
you could have cooked it
But
during the day,
their
bro.
grandmother or granddad said that to them boastfully, like trying to
Well, because
hype up their own people. So
they
they just believe
started
it
cooking meat
and
after
they
the
just go
war.
on with it.
It's like,
Huh?
I mean, no, it's kind
Yeah,
of.
think
I
about
mean,
it, bro.
you
Like
could have started
you're
cooking
fighting
meat
in a
after the war.
battlefield.
Right? Like, what the hell?
You're fighting in a battlefield, and somehow people that are 200 kilometers away from that battlefield can still not cook meat because they don't want to be spotted. Like obviously it
Even
doesn't
if
make
it
sense,
makes
but
sense that Habeshas don't cook meat because, but I mean, the war is long, long ago. I mean, like, why they can't cook meat right now in Addis
I
Ababa
think
because
they just forgot. Yeah, they
they
just
just
forgot
forgot.
that meat can be cooked. On top of that, even like no, on top of that, like if you've even been around Habashas, you know that raw meat is just one delicacy. They do cook meat as well. Like it's not like
Yeah, of
all
course.
meat is uncooked or everything is. But obviously, this is just something that happens where your parents or grandparents or whatever your community says this to uplift their own community and how great they are versus the other, and you believe it because you've never been around those people. And then after a while, it just becomes like part of you, your identity. So you never even actually question the logic. Like it's basically like the othering of your enemy to the point where it becomes illogical.
Yeah, you
But
see,
they believe it. So, but they're a special breed of stupid. So they do believe it over time.
where is
Yeah,
what's his name? I forget the guy's name.
But this
Where's
is
the
emblematic. And I only say this not to share on Somalis, but this is emblematic of, I can't say the whole of Africa because I don't know most African tribes, but especially in the Horn of Africa, Keizo can attest to this. This is emblematic of most Horners in general. Like they uh, they have a very odd mixture of a very high sense, a very detrimental level of superiority complex over the other Horner members. On top of that, to the point where it becomes like retarded. Like they
yeah,
think
it
they
doesn't
are the
make meaning.
superior on every level and everything. Like they to the point where like even their history doesn't make sense if you just step away from it. And this happens to every tribe. If you just take two steps away from it and you just analyze history properly, like obviously it doesn't make sense, but because they're so clouded with the superiority conflict complex over other Horners, it makes sense to them. Like somehow in their brain, it makes sense.
Yep. But I think look, Abby, Somalis remind me of Japanese people, but without the IQ. Right? Literally, that's what they remind me of. Like they're very
I think it's
cultured.
the inbreeding.
Oh yeah, that too, right? But at least they were lucky they didn't get the Down syndrome gene, right? But anyways,
How do you
the
know?
Somalis. Okay. Anyways,
I mean,
oh bro,
okay, so when you have 60 IQ, bro, that is technically Down syndrome, bro. Like, what are we talking about?
Abby, you know it's
Without the
funny, right?
drooling, it's Down syndrome without the drooling on your face.
There was a time I was dating a Somali, right? And my cousin, I have a female cousin that comes over, used to come over a lot. Now she has a baby, so she doesn't. Now, anyways, so this girl of mine at that time, she was accusing me. Like I was like, bro, I was my cousin, right? I didn't understand why she was so skeptical. I thought she didn't believe me. No, it's because obviously for them, that's game. So I was like,
cousin?
what the hell, man?
Cousin's the best. I mean, come on.
That's absolute Illuminati shit, man.
Yeah, but you know what? What Kaiser? I mean, what Abby said about Dwight, man, studying other people. You see, what's even better about it is he actually is also studying out of curiosity. So it's even it's not that he's just some low level guy. Oh, I just want to take you over. It's like no, like if you look at, and obviously not all Dwight is Dwight. We're talking about a particular through line in history. But one significant point is people like Thucydides, basically these Greeks that'll go out there into Persia and writing all kinds of books. Other cultures did not do that. Like they were not
True,
into go. Oh, let me
true.
go see what's going on with Hannibal. Let me see this. They're
Mm,
actually curious. These motherfuckers.
No, true. Like
that's
this
true.
is the one thing I have to give them credit for. And out of all things, bro, they are the most curious people on the planet, bro. Like, because I'm gonna be honest with you, even I struggle with this sometimes. Like, past a certain point, like obviously I came here and I learned some. No, I learned the basics of like Somali clans and so on. But after a certain point, I'm like, yo, fuck these people, man. I don't need to know past a certain point. Like when you look at anthropologists around the world, bro, the white man is the only one that can be an anthropologist in the middle of the Congo jungle, in the middle of in Tibet, in like the middle of the Amazon jungle in Brazil. Bro, most anthropologists of other races, bro, they're just studying their own culture or something that's adjacent to their culture. They're not really going out there and studying some other weird shit, bro. Let's just keep it a stat. And that curiosity, I think, maybe it's because I don't know. I was thinking about. I'm like, maybe it's because, and it's not all white people. Let's be honest. It's mostly the Nordics, and it's mostly Northern Europeans, if we're being honest. And I was like, maybe it's because their environment was always harsher, so they were always in the lookout for something more, for something greater, or
Mhm.
for something more comfortable. That's why they were willing to go out of their way to do it. Whereas, not even just in Africa, bro, but let's be honest, in most parts of Asia, the Chinese are also the same way. The Japanese are the same way. Even the high IQ Asians you talk about, they have a small sense of curiosity, but it's not past a certain point. Like,
Yeah,
it's more
I agree.
easier for other cultures to just say, these are just the others, leave them as so, we're better than them, and we'll just leave it
Exactly. I
at that.
mean, it
It's
is
easier for other
famous.
cultures to build a wall. I mean, think about it. The Great Wall of China, bro. That was a wall to keep the others away,
Yeah, I mean,
the others out,
there's that famous narrative about
and
China and
also
how it was
to
not
keep
opening
yourself
up,
in.
right? And then exactly, and then that's why they got humiliated because yeah, they already had all kinds of supremacy. The Chinese, they could have gone into the world, but they were like, whatever, we're not going there. We're
Yeah,
the best.
generally, I think Abby is correct, right? And so, because going back to the NI of what I asked like earlier, why didn't Ethiopia? Sorry, why didn't Abyssinia and Aksum go and spread their message of the good book to the southern nations, all the way up from the north to the Kenya? They didn't do that, right? So I was like, okay, it's interesting. Even Egypt, right? Sure, they have a lot of whatever it is DNA, but no, really Africa's just Africans were just like, no, I'm okay being in my own country. It's the Europeans who kind of had this ultra crazy explorative nature that they actually went and then obviously turned it into economics. Oh, so this capitalism is also part of it, I guess, which is what Abby was
Yeah,
mentioning.
true,
Really, the whole harshness and stuff, right? They were trying to figure out how to monetize their adventures, like because again, Abby,
true.
look at anime, right? If you look at old anime, the whole kind of fantasy isekai stuff, right? That's all monetizing adventurers. Adventurers go to a dungeon, they get animal skins, they sell it. That's what literally. And again, these are European countries in these animes, right? So yeah, capitalism is really what kind of allowed them to financialize harshness, right? From other whatever regions and shit.
And also,
So
Keizo, I think the other reason I was thinking about this when you said why have not no Habesha empires wanted to go south. I think also like I know this is going to sound bad when I say it. Familiarity with other cultures. Like I think when the average Habesha looked south, they saw pagans, bro. When they looked north, they saw Muslims, but also
oh yeah,
other
they saw
Abrahamic
pit.
religions. So there was like it's we can it's we are more familiar with their system than with the systems further south, if that makes sense.
Yeah, give me 1 second, guys. Let me just shout out to the sponsor of the stream. Shout out to Spellcaster, my Nigerian brother over there with the $5 PayPal. You sent it down yesterday. Appreciate it. Even though I didn't stream, so you sponsored the stream. And also shout out to Caesar Clown from the One Piece for the $5. And also shout out to my brother over here. Just call him, uh, you know, uh, Pukisha for the $20. Kaizura, go to Google. Hume, okay. AI, very interesting and crazy. Okay, shout out. I'll definitely check that out. Right. Appreciate the support. Anyone else who wants to support the stream, and this is a slightly different stream and it's a little bit higher IQ than most. Even Caesar admitted it and ran away. Make sure you send a fast super chat to support the Black and African media so that Kaizo can trick on his woman.
Keizo,
And
what was that Sudanese empire that existed just before? Like, was it in the 1800s that the
wait, I've forgotten the
Abyssinians were
name.
fighting against? They start with
I
an
don't think
M, Ma something.
Merowe.
Yeah, the Maraway. Bro, you notice
Yeah.
even those guys never tried to go south past a certain point. Like the modern day
Yeah.
Sudan, not, I mean,
Yeah.
when northern South Sudan were only combined during the British Empire, it was never
Mhm.
combined by those guys. Because even like
Point.
they were fighting more with the Habashas and the Habashas were fighting them. Like there was never a point where they realized, how come we
And
don't ever try and go south to the
what I don't
Nilotes?
get is
Because they
they were
realized
both Christian.
Huh?
empires. Why didn't they like? They're both Christian empires. Why didn't they like work together? I
No,
just
those
don't
guys were
get that.
Muslims.
Oh, maybe though. Okay, maybe at that point is when they started getting attacked by the
Yeah, that's
Muslims,
when
right?
they started fighting. It was the
Yeah.
Muslims versus the Habesha Christians. But none of them ever looked at the South, what you'd call South Sudan today, and tried to go south there. Think about it. Like obviously they'll do some raids and stuff down there, but they never tried to colonize those areas. It was more, I think there's a sense of fighting a war with an enemy you recognize, and somewhat uh, you feel like you can infiltrate better, even though the white man did it. He infiltrated
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
because
Maybe.
even
Okay.
from,
Look.
I'm looking at it even from their point of view, they never decided to, like it was the white man who combined them and turned them into Sudan, the British who turned them into Sudan. They themselves never went to what you call modern day South Sudan by themselves.
Okay. Yeah.
Another
That's
interesting
good.
commentary about this, about the white man again. That's all I can seem to talk about today. Is yes, we talk about that exploration, and then obviously with that kind of a external kind of capitalism and would dominate, play the game. But we also know that conversely, we're basically saying that they're actually the least tribal, right? Um, they tend to be able to form conglomerations easier, and their general perception is towards universalism, right? Again, with regards to their own mythos and all that, right? There's more of that kind of a universal kind of human because of the scientific or whatever, right? Type stuff. So
They're
whether you call it
humanists.
scientific, yeah, whether you call it scientific or you call it, just curiosity or whatever, there's a generalizing aspect to that, which makes them actually less provincial, right, than the left of their countries will give them credit for. I remember talking to this hippie guy, and I said something about, well, the West is actually quite very open. This motherfucker was arguing with me. He thinks we're more open. He thinks that fucking Somalis are like, like like this guy's delusional. Like, he
But
thinks, oh,
Ike,
the rest of the world is
Ike,
just
this is
free and they want to dance.
Ike, but this is what you don't understand. Uh, it would be oxymoronic if he didn't think they were not open. Like him thinking they are not open is what makes them relatively more open. If you get what I'm saying.
Makes sense. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Because
If he
yeah.
didn't exist, then the West wouldn't be that open.
Yeah. Exactly.
If that part of their society that always thinks that they could be more and more open didn't exist, then they wouldn't be open. Whereas if you could argue the reason we in our societies are not open is because that part of our society doesn't exist. That left wing ish, whatever you want to call it, part of that society doesn't exist. It's just, this is the tradition you're born into. Just do it. Keep your head down. These people, they're not part of you. This is your in group. Keep it there. Move on. And you have children with this woman that is given to you. Like, and you continue that.
So it is a very much so capitalism and all that external stuff, conquering, manifest destiny in the West, is the kind of it has a certain kind of connotation, not the best connotation. And it's also kind of dry and boring, makes the people look down. But then the other side of it is you move one step further to the other side. It's called entrepreneurial, and if you move even further, it's actually called creative and intuitive. Right? That this civilization is the most creative and intuitive one. With the generalization, with the capitalism, with the conquest, with the new, with the left, right? So yeah, I think they should be on top.
Yeah. I
Hey,
mean,
Ike, I'm not even going to lie to you, man. If I always say this, uh, with the exception of Habeshas, of course, I would want my own in group to be on top. With the exception of Habeshas, it's better for the white man to be on top than any other group, bro. For myself, for your own self-interest, if you could not vote your own group as being on top, you would rather the white man be on top. Whatever the Western, that Western identity and Western ideology to be the one that rules instead of the other ideology. If we're being honest,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
Are
mean,
the
you just
what's this Gurage thing I used to hear? Are they part of? Are they
I
Habeshas?
yeah, they are vicious.
Okay, gotcha.
It's actually Gurages are the only tribe that ever rejected me in the long run. So, you know, shout out to them.
That are what?
No, I have apart from that Ghanaian, right? Gurage is the only girl that rejected me in the long run.
Oh, and we're also the most. When you asked about how come no tribes tried to go south, Guragis are the only ones who actually did it past a certain point,
Hmm.
which
Interesting.
makes
So you
sense
got a
because they are the merchant class within the
yeah,
Habesha family tree.
yeah. Merchants. I guess merchants are always looking for, I don't know, exploration and exchange of ideas. To me, they're pretty high level. Abstractly, obviously. Um, in Kenya, the merchant class is usually you're going to see Oromos, Masais are the main merchants, and by merchants I mean like the traveling merchant. I don't mean the Kikuyu set up in like a stall, or the Indian, something like that.
Wow.
Yo, guys, can I ask you a question now that we're on this topic? Would you say the left wing is what makes Western civilization different from most civilizations out there? The prominence of the left wing.
Hmm.
Well, it's a it's a question of a feature as opposed to, so you have this thing and it has this feature. You cannot say the feature is the thing, is what makes it, right? You because it's part of a whole. Um,
Yeah,
but
I
I think
understand
I would
what you mean.
agree with you. Yeah, I would agree with you, generally speaking, that it is inevitable that the quote unquote, within the frame which we're talking about, the competitive landscape that we kind of find ourselves in, the one that's succeeding is going to have that left aspect, right? Um, so because that's where because it's basically a way of cycling through. Because I I've been looking at this. I'm not gonna. This history is massive in terms of, if you just look at a collection of facts, but also in terms of the various ways in which it could be made sense out of. Most of which are kind of trying to wrap a concept around a storm, but it's still interesting anyways. There's still patterns that may be recognized and whatnot. But you see, the cycling through of elites is important for things to move forward, right? The elite to by elite clash, right? So that things move forward. And I think that the mechanism, the way the left does it, is kind of like most cleanest software, because you can have like this society where it's a poly- polygamous society with kings and royal houses, and when you get too many princes every 100 years or something, then they kill each other. That's how change happens, right? um that's another mechanism, but I don't think that's a very efficient mechanism, right? But having a permanent left that's constantly challenging the hierarchy, challenging the order, making sure that the order does make adjustments, as can be seen by the things that England did, for example, with the whole Magna Carta. And the whole English common law history is a history of the kings and the nobles, going back and forth with each other, but also because of the general kind of, again, that universal human right, blah blah, humanist impulse, right? It's a good way of going through the necessary cycles that are required for development.
Did I
Well,
die or something?
Ike knows big words. He knows Magna Carta.
I mean,
He probably.
didn't I finish the sentence properly? Why do you think I was going to keep on talking? I was like, I answered your question, right?
Oh no, I think Ike is
Now,
used
when you
to
just
like.
stop abruptly, it's kind of weird.
I'm
Like
Yeah,
not
you're
you,
going
me,
on the same
you
tempo, and it's just.
weirdos that don't know how to fucking close a
Okay,
case.
so have you noticed that, bro? Ike doesn't like. In
go
most
on.
people's tone, you can kind of hear when they're going to finish a sentence. Ike has the same tone, and then it just stops from. It just falls off a cliff, and there's nothing.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
No,
he's
but
not like.
you are right. Like I was going to add to Ike. Like when I said the prominence of the left wing, I didn't mean it like they dominate. I just mean there's always this almost balanced conflict between the right and left wing, and I'm just using that as an allegorical type of way. I don't really mean like left or right in the way like Democrats versus. I don't mean that. I just mean in terms of ideology. There's always been, and those ideologies change over time. Like what was considered left wing in the 1800s is probably not. It's probably even the right consider that part of their ideology now. But I just mean in terms of there's always this balanced conflict. So, and in one decade, one side might be more prominent than the other. Maybe like in the early 2000s, post 9/11, you could say, I don't know, like right wing ideology was more prominent. We probably live in a time now where left wing ideology has more of the upper hand, but it's always going back and forth. And that always keeps, like you said, uh, the ruling class, it keeps the ruling class cycling in and out depending on who's prominent at the time, and that keeps them evolving. Whereas in most places, let's be honest, man, traditionalism has won out. Like there's no room for whatever left-wing ideology you have. Like, and traditionalism can mean one thing. Like probably in back in the days in China, traditionalism would be, I don't know, the royal, whatever royal institute they have, whatever dynasty they had, and now that traditionalism would be the Communist Party or whatever that is, and there's no actual alternative. And in most places, it's kind of that way. Like in most African places, it's whatever. In Nigeria now, it's probably your own traditions, and that tradition also keeps the political system that you have going, where there is a rotation between presidents, one from the south, one from the north, and so on and so forth. Same with, like, when people say uh, the African politics is based on tribalism. Well, for the most parts, your politics is always going to be a reflection of your culture, right? And if your culture is tribal, why wouldn't your politics be tribal? So, of course, most African countries are going to be tribal. And there isn't really a viable alternative to that. Because as much as you can say, let's stop being tribal, look, bro, if the conditions on the ground don't really have, if there's no real arguments outside of someone living in the West saying, why are you guys so tribal? That tribalism will continue. And that's going to reflect in your politics for the most part. And I'm just saying there's no real alternative between two ideologies clashing out in any other place outside of the West, for being
Yeah,
honest.
you're right completely. Yeah, because the issue now with the Black Americans is they start projecting some crazy thing of the white man as the enemy when actually no, you're living next to Somalis. That's your direct enemy in your country, not some white man that's sitting some abstract land somewhere controlling your economics. So yeah, with the pro blacks, there's always some kind of level of I don't know, just separation from the reality on the ground.
Exactly. Like most people think I'm like, I don't know. Dot was going around saying like a Marxist or something because he heard me say something that I think Marx was using an dialectical materialism, which just basically means, look, for you to understand the thought process of whatever's happening at the moment or in a certain place, you just have to look at the material conditions those people are living in. For
Hmm.
someone who doesn't live in Africa saying Africans need to be less tribal, bro, go live on the ground with the average person. Tribalism is just a fight for resources within your certain country between two separate groups. Of course, niggas are going to be tribal, bro. Like, tribalism for them is what racial politics is for you in whatever Western country you're talking. It's the same shit.
100%. So again, I think it just ignorance from the blacks, etc. Yeah, Panzer.
This guy.
Yes, sir. How's
Yeah, what's
everybody? Ike,
yeah,
Hazorian, and Nilotic. Junta.
yeah,
Hey, how you doing?
Well, thank
We're
God.
good.
Yeah, well, the last those comments obviously, from what I've heard so far, I've been here maybe 5-7 minutes. They're sound. There's never gonna be a vacuum. If once we're done with tribalism, then something is going to replace it. Either classism, something. As human beings, there's never going to be where we reach an equilibrium, and have that equilibrium constant. Even those who have been practicing democracy, capitalism for years, they have their vices. So now we have to make a choice. Because Africans could have been quite innovative and figure a way to make tribalism work. Because the things that are in queue to replace tribalism when we finally slay this beast, they're nothing to sneeze at either. You know, classicism and all that, those things are not pretty. I don't even know how Africans can handle it. So right now, we're just a hodgepodge of all those things, but the underlying tone that is giving impetus to those vices, it's tribalism, clannishness, regionalism, and religion, you know, your primordial stuff that everybody went through. See, one of the things that we can laugh at ourselves sometime, including our forefathers, is that you have these Western countries go through exactly what we're going through now, right? And then they eventually, after violence and everything else, they figured it out and tried to manage it. And actually, they landed in what you would refer in physics, chemistry, I guess, a vacuum permittivity, right? So derived from magnetic constant, the speed of light. I believe the Ike will know those kind of things. But we still make the same mistake they made. That, you know, it's a funny thing. I see, like here in the United States, from maybe 200 years ago, they were putting electric lines, sometimes along train tracks, going from one geographic location to another. But they figured a way to go underground now, under the sea, to lay cables. But even if we're trying to electrify, we still do what they did 200 years ago. We don't leapfrog them now. You know, for example, we still go out there burning fossil fuels, whereas they've set a time certain to get away from that and go into electric or go into solar. But you go to Nigeria right now, even if the most ambitious thing they're planning to do, if they even get to do it, is to generate more kilowatt hour from burning fossil fuels. Even though we have that Sahara Desert sitting right there. If Europeans have that Sahara Desert, right, they wouldn't touch anything else. That's enough energy every second, maybe 1 minute, 15 minutes. So nobody could even dispute it. Enough energy coming from that Sahara Desert to power the entire Africa for a year, and then supply Europe, sell them the excess. That's how much energy is in that Sahara Desert. Scorching. But so that's the thing, it's a laugh. We still have to make the same mistakes they made and go through the same thing they've gone through. So in a nutshell, when you finish with tribalism, it's not gonna be a vacuum there. There'll be something else that will replace it. That's just the way life is. So that's I leave it at that.
Where's Kaizo?
I am here. Shout out to you. Yeah. So yeah, brother's talking about vacuum passivity. Yeah. Look, Panzer. Yeah, the spirit
Yes,
of
sir.
what you're saying. Yeah, the spirit of what you're saying is not wrong. The only issue I have is the specifics. The general is correct, but the specifics are wrong, right? It doesn't matter if Nigeria, let's say, burns fossil fuel uh, to create energy, as long as Nigeria actually has energy. Nigeria doesn't have electricity, so your main task is just to get Nigeria to even be organized. Then the next task is, and I get it, it's part of your whole point, which is that we're 200 years behind. We can't seem to escape that. It's almost like the electromagnetic spectrum that we're dealing with is outside of the passivity rate, right? So we keep just escaping to be part of that, that flow state. So I get it, and I agree with you actually for the most part. The only issue, Fansa, is this, right? Though, can't African countries also, let's say for example, okay, you mentioned the Sahara Desert, so I want to comment on that. Yeah, that's true, but it's not the Sahara is not growing just because of fossil fuel. It's growing because of lack of planting new seedlings, and it's an active process, right, that goes against entropy, to actually replant the seed. So I think the biggest issue that we have is lack of organization. As I mentioned with Abby earlier, if the so-called Habesha people in Ethiopia went down south earlier and colonized the southern nations people, Ethiopia wouldn't even be part of the colonization conversation. They would be part of the Berlin Conference colonizing the rest of Africans, right? So what's your thoughts on that?
Okay, yeah, but before I deal with your last point, I mean, the actual pose that you have, what I was saying, I was not saying that they organized, even though it's all part of the same mess, right? It's actually cheaper to do what I'm suggesting. They don't have to go through the same birth process that developed countries did. We could leapfrog them and jump into 21st century with them right now. But I think you misunderstood virtually everything I said. But it's no big deal, because I'm sure you would agree with it when you play this back at some point. Even what I said about the Sahara Desert, what I'm saying is that there's a lot of energy to be harvested there. No, you don't have to plant and wait. It's there right now. The technology has gotten so good that you even have solar panels that are active at night. There's a lot of heat there, so it's the heat that it will work with in most cases, but also the sun doesn't hurt. And then you could actually store and convert the energy. Incidentally, maybe 3 years ago, I was watching a program where Germans came down to Sahara Desert, and they had the schematics. They built they had it all made to harvest that sun harvest, give some electricity over there around Morocco and all that kind of stuff, and take it to Europe. And it's beautiful. That technology, you should Google it, because it's a YouTube video, and it's right there. All I have to do is take it, because they were eventually stopped somehow. Legally, they couldn't do it, but schematics is right there. And that was before the advances we've made in photovoltaic cells and solar energy. So anyway, that is what I'm talking about. And what was the question you asked me? I believe it was a little variant from what I was going to say. What was the pose that you had?
No, you mostly responded to the main points that I wanted kind of explored. Ike, what do you think of Pansat's response, and what can you add to the conversation?
So there's a question of fundamentals in a stack. So basically, what's more foundational? What's going to be supporting things? If Africans generally haven't demonstrated the capacity to do certain basic things, even with crude implements, let's say, have electricity even with fossil fuels, or organize the civil service in a manner that's professional, discipline, and whatnot, or right, and be stuck in the tribalist bubble. Not that that's whether good or bad, but if that's like the material conditions, then I think what I want to ask is what you asked me before, Kaizo, was like, well, how do you take the African out of this situation? So I hear what Pansat said, and one could talk about the particulars, but with regards to what Pansat said, I'm highlighting the more fundamental lack of organization to even do things at a lower level. But if that is the case, and you may disagree that Africans are missing this kind of understanding or curiosity or long view, how do you get past that situation? Um, uh, Pansat, you said the thing waiting on the other side, because one could make equivalent to getting past the situation with getting past tribalism, and then what's going to be on the other end. You also mentioned, Pansat, that war and bloodshed and whatnot tends to be the normal historical path to crossing this chasm here. But if my question makes sense, how do you cross this chasm?
Well, it's unfortunately it's been evolutionary. There's been some progress. There's been some awareness. Now, do we invoke revolutionary means? Because we know exactly what's on the other side. We know that good is better than bad. Africans know that. They rather have 24-hour electric supply. They rather be competing with the rest of the world. But you have, like you've always had historically in every society, regressive forces, conservative, if you want to be euphemistic. But that's the threshold. Now, if you know the history of virtually every African country, you have to admit in the last 10 years that the arc has, like the clock is going in the right direction, right? It's not going back. It's been clockwise. There's been hodgepodge of anti-clockwise movements, especially in Nigeria, not in the rest of the African countries. So the other African countries, because we used to have a nexus of neocolonialism holding every country back, and they were doing virtually the same thing. Same thing that's happening in Congo is happening in Nigeria. But we're so myopic in our clannishness and tribalism that we don't step back and say, oh, look, it's a common thing. They're doing it in Congo. There are resources there, so there's violence there. Oh, over here in the southeast of Nigeria, there's oil. We have a similar situation. Or there you go over there in South Africa, you got diamonds, and we have visitors, and they're colonizing and they're doing stuff. So we haven't done that where then we can say, okay, then we have to take care of this. This is foreign. Even though the methodologies might be local, they might be, because it's so childish. These neocolonials, what they do, they don't really change tack. They come in a geographical location, and then they bring somebody from outside that geography to be in charge of the economy and the resources, and they're gonna sternly warn them, hey, look, this doesn't belong to you. You be in charge of it. If you don't do what we tell you to do, then we're gonna have the people who own it take it back. Okay, it's evident in Rwanda, right? That one's gone through the whole circle, so now we can study that and see that it fits Nigeria like a glove. By the way, not to downgrade our responsibility and our own faults inside each one of these polities. But in Rwanda, it's funny because you have the Hutus who are like your Yoruba, Igbos, and Hausas, right? Indigenous populations. The Hutus in the case of Rwanda. And then you have the Tutsis coming in and mix up, but they're a minority in Rwanda, but they seize the economy. So in the 90s, the Hutus had enough, and they say, hey, look, because the provocation was just like we have the provocations now in Nigeria. And what the United Nations is going to do is already set, ready to go, because you had Buhari come in and he put in a woman in UN that's called Miss Mohammed. That's second in command at the UN. So no matter what violence is happening in Nigeria, the United Nations doesn't care. So in Rwanda, the Hutus had enough, and they attacked their neighbors and friends who are the Tutsis, and then the UN declared it to be a genocide, and then took that country from them. Militarily and otherwise helped the Tutsis now take it for themselves. And the progress, and they're building nice roads, nice buildings, but under the surface, it's still the Tutsis who've taken over that country. And now projecting power beyond that shores to Congo and other flat-nosed Africans, right? So make a long story short, that's what we have in Nigeria, and that's what they're brewing. You have these Fulanis making trouble with every indigenous group in Nigeria, they could get upset one day and say, you know what, we've had enough of this. And if we ever do that, then they're going to take over our
I have
country.
a question for you, Pansat, right?
Yeah,
Isn't that
sure.
mean Nigerians are weak? How is it that Hausas, you're claiming Hausas are indigenous, Yoruba, Igbos, right? These are the majority. How are
Right.
you being railroaded by a bunch of Fulanis? Doesn't that make you weak?
No, because that's not who's railroading us, right? The people, the hand that's railroading us is Saudi Arabia. We're in OPEC, right? Saudi Arabia is about 30 million, 30 something million people, but only about half of that are indigenous Saudis. A lot of the others are Indians, there's all kinds of people working there, right? And we're in this cartel, and they're producing 10 million barrels of oil a day. Nigeria has 230 million people, right? And our quota is 1.5 million, something like that. Let's round it up at 2 million barrels a day. But not only that, they help with Britain, who has 2 or 3 or 4 largest oil companies in the world. And Scotland has a little lake of oil. We have Brent crude oil in our country. So they're taking our oil. Okay, so in order to do that, there's all kinds of, let's just put it conspiracy theory level kind of thing, right? But there's something there whereby we're in this cartel and we cannot look side in the eye, poke them on the nose, as a matter of fact, and tell them to get the hell out of here. Either they do what we say in that OPEC or we're out. So they take our oil, but then they get to determine, they pick who is our leader. And then they pick him from the north and they give him support, because it's not like we didn't do anything. When they discovered that oil, what we call Biafrans, Southeasterners, they didn't want to play ball with Britain. We fought for independence with the help of others. But these British people, they learned how to colonize a long time ago. They even tried to colonize the United States, China. It wasn't long ago that China gave them a date certain to roll up their flags and get the hell out of Macau, Hong Kong, and so many other places over there. And then you have India. You have so many large geographic areas that they colonize. So what is Nigeria, right? So they know how to do it. And they're doing it with these Fulanis. So that's what, when we went to war, we went fight. Like me, I saw the planes, right? The pilots, if we shoot it down, they're not northern Nigerians or something like that. Those pilots were from Egypt, from Russia, from Britain. That's who we're fighting against. Just as the portion of Nigeria who fought that war, but they eventually took those resources. You go to, it's like South Africans. They have diamonds. They're rich, but when they came there, the Boers or whoever the hell they were, they would take. These are just companies that are commissioned, and they could go and take over a population. But there are people behind, capitalists, But anyway, make a long story short. No, the people who are fighting are not those Fulanese, those Muslims from the north. There are people behind them. So,
well, you said if the other tribes were to say we've had enough, and then what? Then the real confrontation with the real enemy, or a temporary disturbance with regards to the plans of the enemy and the stooge of the enemy, or what?
Yeah, no, they did. Even like in this last election, they did, right? If you watch that election, there were alliances that's never, you never think about. For Peter Obi is from the southeast, and then you have Edo's voting with him, as a matter of fact, championing him. You had some northern states, mostly northern Christians, Yorubas, for example, Lagos, Abuja. He won like 12 states, even with a rigged election. But they were taken aback. The real people who are doing this, like you're saying. So there's this awareness now. That's a seismic shift, not a change. What happened in that election, right? So now is the consequences that we have. Everybody's mulling over. The calculation has begun, because what they did was desperate. They literally shut off the beaver machine. They turned it off. even on the screen of the results, it shows certain states that's been won by the Labour Party, and they say, forget it. So do what you're gonna have to do. So now France, obviously, Tinubu, who's an asset of France right now, and Britain and America reluctantly, but eventually stamped it, right? Because that's where, like me, that's what I'm watching. What would the United States do? Once they were unwilling to adhere to the tenets of democracy and reject what happened, then what can we do? So, but now we know. Do you understand what I'm saying? All the tribes, they try to do it democratically, that coming together. So it's there on the ground democratically. It's happened already. The Labour Party won that election. The guy who's sitting there now didn't probably win even a single state. Is that bad? But still, they hold the lever. The guy who left, Buhari, is a formidable character. I mean, he's slim and lame and evil, but he has an aura with a lot of Nigerians because he used to be a military dictator. That's why people such as Saddam Hussein, in order for the Iraqis to get off of that kind of course, they have to show that he was executed. When they capture Saddam Hussein, if you just put him in jail, those people are still going to be taken. One day he's going to come out. So, so the way normally they do it is that people like Buhari, who committed a coup d'etat, who's been an evil agent, right? Those kind of people should be executed for the country to come off that spell. But in Nigeria, things are not done that way. It's evolutionary, but the things have been laid. The foundation has been laid now. So it's now what happens next is the thing. They didn't revolt and come out and fight it out of the streets.